Hello and welcome to Monday Morning Detective. This is episode 11. My name is Gino Scala and today we have a very special guest. I'm really very excited about speaking with this gentleman. He's a friend of mine and I told you last week that we were going to speak with him. He is a private investigator who's been involved in the John Benet Ramsey murder case. And let me bring him aboard. This is Richard Cardo. Richard, come on in.
Hello.
Hi.
How's it going?
Very good.
I brought my thinking cap with me.
Now, 25 years ago, well, it was 1996, Christmas of 96, the John Benet Ramsey murder hit the news. And you were living in Colorado Springs, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And just a little bit of a background. Why don't you tell us what you do professionally, what you were doing professionally at that time, and generally how you got involved?
My vocation's music. I'm a professional musician, conservatory trained, played with a lot of famous names, originally from New York City. But I wanted to move my family someplace a little more family-friendly, religious-friendly, and Colorado Springs was a perfect place. Now, the reason why I'm glad you mentioned that, Gino, and thank you for having me on.
My pleasure.
You're a good man. This is something that needs to be addressed, and I know how you feel about kids, and I'm along the same way. But when it came out there, I've always had a knack for profiling. Okay, and it's actually a natural thing if you're a professional musician like I am. You have to be in touch with your audience. You have to feel them out. Composers, who died like hundreds of years ago, you have to kind of connect and understand and evoke what they were feeling and thinking through their music. So I developed a really great gift for profiling, and I've helped a lot of people in the past with investigations and crimes, on the down low a little bit, and so when in Colorado Springs, of course, John Benet Ramsey, that was a really big story when it happened. And I tended to believe everything else I heard on the news. I didn't really look into it until, let's see, my wife, the Ramseys wrote a book, Death of Innocence, okay? And she brought it to me. She wanted me to look at it because she knew, how I would look into investigations. And right away, I knew there was an issue, okay? The Ramseys were being railroaded. So I took a look at a website they had where it had a ransom note, the famous ransom note. And I tell anybody right now listening to the podcast, if you have an opportunity, get a copy of that ransom note. Put it in front of you if you get a chance. Okay, I'll go through it and try to describe it as best as I can, but you have to understand, you want to solve a crime, you can't just jump at crazy theories, okay? You need to look at the evidence, as you know, okay? Evidence is the important thing. You can't put your opinion or whatever it is. You need to look at the evidence. And it was very apparent that there was a lot of things we could get out of this ransom note, which, right, at first glance, I knew right away it was an intruder who had written it. And we'll go into that a little bit.
Okay.
A couple of things I derived from the book right away. Burke, for example, a lot of people thought Burke had done something.
Burke is the son.
Yeah, Burke Ramsey, 9-year-old boy, and they thought he had killed his sister. Let me help you guys out with this, okay? You may not have heard, but on the day the crime, they called the police and they were in the house. They had sent Burke to a neighbor's house, okay, a friend's house, so he wouldn't be exposed to the ugliness of what might happen later on. So that eliminates Burke right away, people, because if your son had committed murder at 9 years old, would you send him someplace where he could blab about it, open his mouth and say something? No way, right? You wouldn't take that chance.
Okay.
So I eliminated Burke right away.
Right.
Okay.
All right. So just to recap, it was 6 years after the actual crime that you got personally involved.
Right.
And you did so as
I was a private investigator.
You were a private investigator, and this was kind of a hobby to do the profiling. And of course, it's the biggest case of the 20th century.
Right.
One of the biggest cases of the 20th, certainly one of the biggest unsolved cases of all time. Uh, it would certainly rank in the top 10. And especially, in my opinion, and just so you know, the camera's up there above the computer. The the what when you hear the facts of the case, it is so, they were. It's how could it? It seems very solvable. It seems very solvable. I mean, usually cases like this are solved very quickly. You have several people at the residence. You have a lot of evidence. The not
The garage.
the garrote and sexual assault and the head,
Injury.
the injury. So there's a lot of evidence here, and you have a how many page ransom note?
2 1/3 at least
Two
pages.
2 1/3 pages that were paper written, the paper that was gathered at the Ramsey's house. The pen was the Ramsey's pen, and it was written at the scene. And that to sit down and write a 2 1/3 pages of a ransom note takes a lot of time. Especially that I don't think there were any cross-outs, mistakes, maybe one or two.
Well, he wrote actually several pages. He kept editing because they could tell how many sheets were used.
Did he throw them away? And
No, he didn't throw them away. He kept them, but
okay,
they could tell how many sheets were used.
I see. And so whoever it was wrote several pages of a ransom note, which takes quite a bit of time. They also had information as to his recent bonus, which was what, $144?
That was the assumption, 118,000 plus and change, right? And here's the thing: the terrible thing about this crime is all the coincidences that you'll find. Okay, because they put down 118,000, but it really wasn't quite that amount. Okay, and Lou Smith. I don't know if we talked about that yet.
Not yet. We haven't brought him
Right.
up.
I worked with Lou Smith and consulted to him.
Mm-hmm.
He met with me several times, and and just from the newspaper account, a lot of ransom demands and kidnappings are done by Mexicans, right? Mexican gangs in the areas, okay, in that southwestern area, and he said the 118,000 was convertible into Mexican pesos at an even number, which was true. I checked it out at the time. I forget what the exact number was, but it was convertible to
100,000,
like something like that.
Okay,
So
interesting.
yeah, and it really, I think it's true. It helps. It helps with the math. And
So-
my analysis.
That would imply that someone of the Mexican culture or familiarity with their money system, maybe as an escape or something of that nature, might request that amount. I mean, that's the assumption.
And that's a very important thing to look at for motive, because funny, the people I tracked down were talking about traveling to Mexico.
Okay. Now, it's just odd that he had that exact amount of in bonus. And in police work, there are no coincidences. I mean, there just aren't. After the fact, when you sit back and everything's done, the person's executed, and you say, "Hey, that's coincidentally, he killed the child on the date of his birthday," or something like that. But it's not. You can't show that it was in the forefront of their mind. So we don't believe in coincidences. And that the press, again, it was constantly stressed that 118, which is an odd amount to ask for. And this is the first time I've heard of it being converted into
Around
pesos. and so forth. So anyway, you get involved and you do your own investigation, and then you go to the district attorney or the police. You go to the police department first.
Yeah. Well, no, actually, I went to Lou Smith first.
You went to the detective, the main the detective in charge of this investigation, Lou Smith, who was in his 60s or so at the time,
Sharp, super sharp, though.
Oh yeah, he had 30 or 40 years.
guy.
He's gone now, but he was a very well-known detective with a record of successful cases behind him.
200 cold cases, 90% solve rate. Huge.
Yeah. So I mean, he was Joe Kenda before Joe Kenda was Joe Kenda. So you reached out to Lou, who did not treat you as a nut, as a conspiracy theorist, as a crazy, because crazies come out of the wall.
Right. There's tons of people out there, and I wouldn't have been surprised. I just I showed him. I talked to him about a few things that I found, and he realized what I was saying clicked. Okay. For example, I told him that I thought phone people were involved.
Telephone.
Right. People who, particularly freakers. Okay, freakers are people who hack into phone numbers. Which kind of makes sense because, during the holidays, they listen in on phone calls to get people's credit card numbers, okay, and other information. So they're working during the holidays. Okay, so, and he told me, he says, that's very funny because there were a lot of issues with the phones. The Ramseys told him that they were having all kinds of weird things with the phones happening. Okay. So then I talked to Lou Smith and I showed him, and all I wanted to do was just give him a profile I made off the ransom note. Because all my life I've noticed that when a case is unsolved or it's hard to solve, usually the profile is not right. Okay. So, and that's why I took a look at the profile. And the best source was the ransom note. The ransom note, 2 1/3 pages of material. And it tells you so much about the people that were involved. So I was able to attribute the profile as a phone freaker. Okay. There are a couple of reasons why. First, I started with the initials. I thought the initials, he signed it. Okay. He's telling us who he is here. Okay. So,
What initials did he use?
It's S, B, T, and C. Okay. Now,
and there were all sorts of theories that it's some kind of terrorist group or a kidnapping clan or something of that nature.
Well, they mentioned in the ransom note that they were
That's right.
a foreign faction.
A foreign faction.
Which is funny because when I tracked these people down and I found out what the name of their group was, the initials are the same as a foreign faction, a very famous foreign faction. So the inside joke was there. Okay, the connection was there. It's one of the things that just kept telling me this is the people who did it. Okay, so they just answered all the questions, right, that came out of the ransom note. But let's go back to SBTC.
Well, let's hold off.
All right.
We're going to stop this episode and continue on to other chapters. Okay, so this is Monday Morning Detective, episode 11, and we're going to end it here. We'll be back next week with Richard Cardo and talk more about the John Benet Ramsey homicide.